one of the things I'm proud of is other software products. So we've challenged them by building lots of integrations and doing things differently. And that's meant the whole veterinary software industry has kind of had to think about how does it change.
You've somehow got to reorientate their thinking to your software that eventually is going to help them, but they probably don't realize that initially.
Yeah, well, there's definitely plenty of that. And I think if you maybe this is changing a bit now, but certainly for a long time, if you asked a vet, can I talk to you about changing your software? They'd be like, yeah, when I'm in my casket and they're burying me at my funeral, you're welcome to come and talk to me about changing the software. So it's definitely not something that they're keen to talk about, but actually when they get into it, they find that, there can be some pretty big benefits. So it goes okay, but it's not on their bucket list. Their bucket list is all about being patient orientated and, like if they're a surgeon, they just want to cut patients and get good outcomes from there. If they're an oncologist, they want to treat cancer, and really, what they're passionate about is that, not about computer software or technology. But when they kind of understand that it can help them achieve better things clinically, then they get a bit more interested and, a bit more passionate about us, letting us help and trying to help them do better things. Because you've got to remember that most vets didn't go to vet school to be business owners or run practices or practice management software or whatever. They went because they were passionate about horses or cats or dogs or anything really, in that clinical and scientific world. So it's quite a big paradigm shift for them to think about running a business, and I think it's something that actually universities are starting to do a much better job of teaching them, how to actually think about the business side as well as the clinical side.
I like on your website, your catchphrase there is Ezyvet software helps vets be vets. It's just simple. It's like, yeah, you want to be a vet. You don't want to have to struggle or think about all the other things. But you started this organization back in 2006. What was it like back then trying to make that shift happen, trying to get veterinarians to take on a different way of doing business with a different set of tools with your software versus what they already had, which probably, I'll let you answer on that. What did they have, and then how did you deposition that?
Yeah, well, I mean, we kind of fell into the opportunity really because we were providing IT services, and we had a client that wanted to change software primarily because it was a DOS-based software, and I think at that stage Microsoft was like basically making it impossible to run this DOS software in like 2004 or something. That like can't run the DOS software in Windows whatever at that stage anymore. So they had to make a change, and it was the last thing that they really wanted to do. And we were kind of the trusted advisor that went looking, and then we came back and we're like, well, there are some options, but they're not great, and they're not really ticking the boxes that you've asked us to go and find. So maybe naively back then we were just like, well, we'll build your website and you can put your clinical notes in there and it'll be great. But I guess as we got more and more into it, we figured out actually there was quite a big opportunity, and actually there was a lot of paper and a lot of people that ran around to move bits of paper to achieve things, and that was exciting for me, is that we could actually change the workflow, and the software is kind of the conduit that comes from actually what you're changing below that. And I think one of the reasons we've done well actually internationally is because we thought more about that than actually building software. So we tried to solve the problem with software rather than build software to solve a market or answer a market opportunity, if that makes sense. And I think for a lot of Kiwi businesses, you hear those sort of stories where someone built an apple sorting machine that was really good because they were really passionate about doing that without manually doing it, and that's why they solved the problem rather than apple sorting machines are a multi-million-dollar market opportunity and we can get rich from it. It's more passion that comes from actually what you're trying to solve, and I think internationally we see less of that. It's more commercial. It's more, here's an opportunity, it's worth this amount of money, this is how we execute on it. Certainly our venture was the other way. We were like, well, this is exciting, we can get rid of all this paper and help these people kind of do things automatically rather than manually, and that's going to give them more time to do, more of the stuff that they want to do with the patients.
So when you go and visit one of those businesses, and some of the names I've seen on your website there around, Southern California Vet Imaging, Vet Cancer Group, Gulf Coast Equine, Animal Emergency Clinic, Green Dog Dental, there, it seems like quite a diverse set of veterinarian needs with different animals. They're going to have different conditions. How did you step back from all that and conceptually decide, okay, what's our workflows in software that's going to solve all of these things for all these different businesses? Was there a standard set of things that they all do that you were looking to solve?
Well, I mean, I think we started in referral. So, if you go to your general practice vet and when you've got a puppy or a kitten and you're going to get it vaccinated and you're going to learn how to look after it and stuff, but if your dog runs into another dog and breaks its leg, depending on who that general practitioner is and how difficult that particular, sort of condition is or whatever the situation is, they're probably going to at some point consider referring you to someone who knows a lot about being a surgeon or someone who knows a lot about oncology or something like that. And it's not that they couldn't provide the service, but it's the same as us going and seeing a neurologist in human healthcare, where we have an opportunity to go to someone who specialises just in that thing and has a bit more knowledge and is able to probably provide a better level of care potentially because of the tools and the knowledge and the types of cases that they've worked on consistently. So our very first hospital was a referral hospital, and we so what we got from that was scale. So they tend to be much larger, and also the workflow into departments is much more complicated, and there's a lot more opportunity to make it seamless. And so, like, commonly I'll see in a referral setting, a dog will get hit by a car, it'll present to the emergency vet. The emergency vet will go through and, take an x-ray and do the case. Then they're not quite sure what's going on, so it'll go to internal medicine and they'll have a look and do an ultrasound. Then it'll need surgery, so it'll go to the surgeon. Then it'll need rehab, so it'll go to rehab therapy to, do the aquabath treatments or whatever. So the flow in between all of those, how they send information back and forward, how the billing works and amongst all of that, that's all kind of quite complicated. So because we solved that early on, when we went into a smaller practice, we almost kind of had to dull our product down a little bit to actually be a good fit. And so we had this like enterprise capability in the workflows that enabled us to answer problems as we went along. So, for an example, if I was to talk about a small animal vet versus an equine practice, they're very different. They kind of try and do the same things in general in terms of providing care for their patients, but a horse is going to weigh a ton, whereas a chihuahua's not. And so there's some real different sort of types of work that they do, and they work in different applications. And so most of our adaptation, as we've kind of gone out to market and started working in all sorts of different sectors, and it's quite a sort of horizontally sectored industry, we've worked from this enterprise platform down into each of those branches or fingers, and then we've been able to carve out good niches in those. And it's been really neat because a lot of them are underrepresented. So if I take the specialty practice in America, which is a really sort of solid foundation of our customers, if they do lots of different things and say one of those things is oncology, we would have to answer that to be able to service that multidisciplinary practice. But now, because we've done a good job of that, actually any oncology practice will probably like our product because we've kind of refined it for oncology. So that's what opens up each of those fingers in the market to be able to go and kind of attack the, cardiology or oncology or neurology or, there's a million different service lines. If we've got it in human healthcare, they've definitely got it in veterinarian, vertical, and that's been really important to us.
So if I understand you correctly there, you're taking the veterinarian part is actually a jump off point for you. That's the broad horizontal where the vets have a certain instruction set or workflow that they need. And then these specialist units that the animals get referred to depending on the condition, like the urology or the, what was the other one, the cancer specialists. Does the business development part, once you get one of those businesses, does that then create a knock-on effect where the rest within that ecosystem go, oh, this is now the way things are done? Or is it quite isolated in the way our district health boards are in New Zealand, where each group does completely their own thing at their own pace?
Yeah, no, so I mean, one of the reasons that we really back ourselves in the vet space is that although there are some subtle differences, for the most part, the veterinary market globally is the same. So if we're going to treat a patient in New Zealand for cancer, we're going to do it the same way, hopefully, as what you do in the UK or Australia or Hong Kong or the US. And so when we would build one thing for one practice, it would definitely roll out to the rest. I mean, I think we were pretty bullish at trying to discover what best practice was as well. Like, what does great technology look like in the vet space, and then go out and sort of put that in some of the biggest hospitals and then tell everyone that this is the way they should be doing it, and almost kind of bully them into doing it that way. But that wasn't a bad thing, because we're not, when we started, things were just, it was all paper and all systems were not integrated. And now we live in this highly connected world. But that didn't exist 10 years ago. And so, one of the things I'm proud of is other software products have, we've challenged them by building lots of integrations and doing things differently. And that's meant the whole veterinary software industry has kind of had to think about how does it change to kind of keep up with that.
Do you have that that network effect benefit? Peter Thiel talks about where the more nodes you have within the ecosystem, the more it makes sense. So every customer that comes within the Ezyvet ecosystem, it actually becomes more valuable for everyone to get more referrals, to get more productive between vets and those specialists. Does that happen yet, or is that still a while away? Where are you with that market saturation? Because you're in what, UK, US, Canada, New Zealand,
Australia, New Zealand. We've got good customers in Asia and the Middle East and stuff as well. There's kind of two things I'd say there. From a technology point of view, we've built a really big ecosystem around our product, and so we saw what Xero was doing 10 years ago about not just building everything, but building the bit they did really good, and then adding these ecosystem partners and actually encouraging them rather than locking them out. And so in veterinary, if you own software product, the idea of integrating with anybody was like a foreign commercial concept that you wouldn't do it. In fact, you would fight everything to make sure that you definitely didn't do it. Whereas we went completely the other way. We saw those ecosystem partners as really important. What that's meant is that we have data that flows back and forth between not only our platform, but lots of other platforms. And so when we go to sell our product in a market, lots of different customers use different ecosystem partners. So it's not just our platform that becomes part of that decision-making framework. It's actually what are all the ecosystem partners doing as well. So that's helped us. There's still a huge amount to do. So if I've got my pet at a general practice and I go to a referral practice and get surgery and then come back, that information flow is better than it was, but it's still not where we need it to be. And so there's lots of work technically to do that. I think that our approach in the US and what worked really well for us though was that we would go into a city, say Chicago for example, we would nail like one or two really influential largest practices in that city. And then because all of the general practices refer into those big sort of motherships, if you like, they'd be like, oh, what's the software? They're sending us these things we haven't had before. This looks interesting. And so we just got a lot of brand exposure by doing that. And then what we found, particularly in the US, is that it's a very tight-knit group that own all those big practices, and they're all in like, business performance networking groups and stuff like that. So wow. We got a lot of market share very quickly. And really none of the other software vendors in that referral space were able to slow us down. And then once we established as kind of being the dominant player in that referral space, we were able to really get momentum in the primary care sector. I mean, today we're about 30% referral and 70% primary care. So primary care has become a huge part of our business, but it's happened because we own the referral space. And I think, you put our product into referral hospital, it just naturally works really well. We've had to work really hard at making our product a good fit for general practice and make sure that it's complex enough but simple enough. Across a 1 vet practice to 100 vet practice, there's a lot of different nuances that we kind of deal with, and different things that they want to achieve with their technology as well.
That's fascinating, because you're actually using between that, that main hospital, that internal referral, that whether, I don't know if it's an email or a text, but that data and how you present that's actually marketing collateral for you. And if you're doing a good job there from that into the referral, then that organization, the specialist that receives it's going, I like what I'm receiving here. It's clear. I understand what I need to do with this patient, a horse, a cat, a dog. I wish all of the general hospitals did it this way. Have I interpreted that correctly?
Yeah, it's probably more the other way around. Like, we probably got into the referral centres, and then the referral centres are sending back those referral reports saying, this is what we did, this is what the outcomes are. And then the primary care vets are going, well, this looks really cool, what's this all about? I think also, referral veterinarians are hugely respected. A lot of them are boarded certified, which takes a huge amount of study. So the primary care sector kind of relies on those specialists and really looks up to them. So when they hear from them that what we're doing is really cutting edge and we're linking things up in a way that they hadn't seen before, then they listen. And I go right back to what I said at the start. What do we do to actually get the vet to have a look? Well, that's the important bit. And I think once we get them to have a look, it's once we've got them in that funnel and they've had a look, generally we have a pretty good hit rate with them. It's getting them to have a look, because they really, changing software is the last thing that they'd like to focus on. But when they see that it can save them time and money, and that's been really important. And one of the trends that we've seen in the vet industry over the last few years, it's been also quite critical, is that recruiting vets is impossible. And that's happened for a couple of different reasons, but one of the sort of bigger factors is that a lot of vets don't want to work as much as they did perhaps 20, 30 years ago. So we used to have a fairly male-dominated industry. We've now got a very female-dominated industry, and we used to have vets that work 7 days a week. We've now got people, vets that want to work 4 days a week and have work-life balance and stuff. So, if you just take the veterinarian workforce and you take them from 5 days to 4 days, well, you suddenly need 20% more vets, and the vet schools just haven't been able to keep up. And what we see, particularly in America, is all of our consolidated customers or our corporate groups, the number one pain point for them is actually just hiring enough vets. So how do we help from a technology perspective? Well, we build a product that they like using, but we try and automate anything we can so that at the end of the day they can go home and spend time with their family. And what we saw, particularly in referral centres, is that they would, the patient would go in the consult room, the vet would sort of look at the patient, they'd work patient up, then the customer would go back in the waiting room, the vet would write up the invoice and then send it out the front so that the patient could go home. And the challenge with that is, if you do that back to back all day long, by the end of the day, you've then got to sit down and write all your medical records. And that could be like 2 to 3 hours work. And that might be the difference between getting home at 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And so we tipped it right on its head, and we were like, well, you can't generate an invoice manually. You must write the medical record, and then from the medical record, we should be able to figure out what you should be charging. And then once the patient's out the door, you don't have to do anything. So when you come to the end of your day and the end of your shift, actually you can go home and it's all done. And so we've seen better clinical compliance because of that. We've seen huge amount of time saved, and that's probably what inspired us, certainly over the last 5 years, to really focus on everything that we can automate. And there's lots and lots of things that we can automate that affect all the people in the vet hospital, not just the vets, but the front of house people, the technicians, whether that be online bookings, whether it's taking X-rays and blood results and stuff and pumping them back into the system electronically rather than manually. There's just a myriad of things that we've been able to do that have saved a lot of time.
That's amazing to hear that it's actually used then as almost like an HR tool, and you can imagine a vet going, what software do you use at this vet? Because they know that if your Ezyvet software's in there, they're going to get home on time, and there's less paperwork. They get to be a vet, not a vet plus an administrator of the work that they do. Do you get to see aggregated effects on what patient, obviously anonymized, but what are the typical things that vets deal with in the US versus Canada versus Australia, or the types of pets? Like, some people have snakes, some countries don't have snakes. Do you get to see any of that trend analysis at an anonymous level?
Yeah, cool. So, we see it at multiple levels, and whether it's clinical data that we're looking at, financial data, patient data, there's lots of analysis that we can draw from what we're doing. And I think that, before the cloud came along, everybody had their own data that was stored on their own server. And actually, we still see that in veterinary today, because about probably 85% of veterinary hospitals today still use server-based product. So we're very early in the adoption phase for cloud in the veterinary vertical. But what it's meant is that we've built this huge repository of data. So we currently have about 1,500 hospitals and about 40,000 users globally using our platform. And so when you've got 40,000 people seeing patients and generating data every day, you generate a lot of data. And when you have a lot of data, then you can do some really neat things with it. And I think, we've been watching through the COVID crisis really closely at who's doing well, who's not, why, what are the trends. And we've spent a lot of time in the last few years looking clinically at how do people solve problems, what products and services do they use, how long does it take them, what are the results when they do it this way or that way. And so now that we've got this big repository of data, the ability to use machine learning and AI to kind of analyze it and then provide it back to the user is a very exciting concept. And we're still really early on that journey, but we couldn't be on that journey without all the data in the first place. And I hear heaps of people talking about AI and machine learning. It's the new buzzword and everyone's into it. And I'm excited about it too, but it's not that useful if you don't have much data, because you can't draw the conclusions. And so if someone starts up a brand new software product and they don't in our space and they don't actually have much data, they're not going to be able to provide that much value. So we're very excited about what that means in the future. And we've had a bit of a focus and a segue into training vets now. And certainly over the last couple of years, we've really entered that university veterinary software market space. And so not only do we have commercial data, but we're starting to see data that's academic. And so we have to convince them to give it to us anonymously so that we can use it. But we do that by giving it back to them. And so together we can have these partnerships with academia and commercial-focused vet groups to really change what can happen in the future. And I reckon in 5 years' time, there'll be lots of things, procedures, lots of things that take certain amounts of time, or we do certain ways that will completely change based on all the analytics that we can learn about how they do it, why they do it, and what the outcomes are. And I think that probably extends further than just the vet clinic as well. And I think that's, that's the next step, is how do we actually figure out what's happening at home? So when I'm not in the vet clinic, how do I get data back to the vet that actually is important? And, if I have a procedure, a dog's had surgery, it's gone home, how do I make sure I do all the right things to make sure that the treatment has been successful? And we know, if you roll your ankle when you're playing sport, you've got to go to the physio, you've got to do your exercise, you've got to do these things. It isn't really any different, but it's just much more difficult to actually administer that and get visibility on it. So I think we're looking forward to some of that stuff happening over the next few years as well.
Hey, just a quick interruption. Thanks for watching a Kiwi original. If you're liking this episode, then hit the notification button, and that means you'll see when every new episode gets released. We've done 40 already. We've got another 50 lined up. Right, now back to the episode. So reading between the lines there, with that data, you're almost crowdsourcing amongst a group of veterinarians that are highly qualified through actual practice, what's working, and through that university layer, if you're giving them anonymized data, it should lead to more accelerated best practice on how to treat for certain conditions or injuries. And then that third part is post-operation care in the home, which usually is invisible to the vet because it's solved the problem, and now it's up to you as the owner of the pet to kind of do your best. That's a really interesting area. How do you get the vets, because you've obviously invested a lot in the infrastructure, the software infrastructure, how do you get them to then understand and learn every feature? Because part of, as you say, is getting the data, but part of it is making sure that your vets are using it in the most fulfilled and optimized way.
Yeah, well, that's really challenging. I mean, and it's challenging not only because it's a really big task. It's challenging because we do it differently. So if you go into a vet hospital and they've been seeing a patient or writing an invoice or creating a medical record a certain way for 30 years, and then you want to tip that on its head and do it completely the opposite way, that change process is really, really hard. And if you don't get it right, you won't get the outcomes that you want, and they won't either. And so we're lucky that we have a lot of success, but we get there in some ways through grit and determination, and actually just having a big support network of current customers that can kind of convince them it's worth the pain. And if you look online, like all the reviews that talk about our product, they're like, what a mission to change software. But when we got there and when we understood it, it was totally worth it. And I remember there's actually a guy, there's a guy in Southern California that he was like quite overwhelmed when we first went into their surgery practice. And but he worked away at it, and he was sort of constructive about it. But about a year later, he wrote a review online, and he was like, it took me ages to figure this out, and it's like jumping in a 747, and there's a million dials and buttons all around me, and I don't know what they all do, and I find it really daunting. But once I've figured it out and I've had the training and I understand it, now when I want to do something, it's right in front of me. So I'm able to be like 10 times more efficient. I'm able to do the things that I want. And I think the reality is that most veterinarians are scientists, so they think clinically in a way that's probably a little bit deeper than people realize. And so they want something that looks clean and simple, but they also want a huge amount of detail and complexity. And the way that they think about it demands that they understand all the outcomes and stuff. Well, it's a very difficult balance to have feature complexity and lots of different features, but also maintain something that's really simple and user-friendly and easy to pick up quickly. We've got a bit of a balance with that, and I don't think we've got it necessarily right yet, but we're getting there. And I think now we've sort of evolved a lot of our functionality to be, have the ability to be complex, but also have the ability to be simple. And some of the other things which we're excited about from a machine learning AI standpoint, as well as from a user perspective, not just the data and what we're doing there, but how do they use our software? So if they don't click on these areas of the application, maybe we can suggest to hide them because they don't use them. So adapting the user experience based on what we're seeing, and that can be across more than one user as well. So we might say, well, what we see from a cardiologist across 40,000 users, we can draw some conclusions about what parts of the software they want to use and what parts they don't, where we're adding value and where we're not. And I think that customer-centric design is so critical to building software, because we always fall in the trap where we're like, this is how they should do it, where we really need to be, we need to understand how they actually do it or how they want to do it, rather than how we think they want to do it, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think what you've outlined there is what a lot of software businesses, particularly very large ones, grapple with, is that simple software is excellent when you're just starting out and there's a simple instruction set. But as you get more customers, you learn more about them and you add more features, and they're more complex ready because they've had your software for some time. And the more complex and accurate your software gets, the harder it becomes for a new user to get up to speed. So there's always that tension, and it's a healthy tension to have. The challenge, and I think you've addressed it, or one way of doing it is reduce it based on AI. Reduce the buttons or the features that aren't being used, at the risk, of course, of if it's not there, it's then hard to make it reappear. Is there any audio layer, like in the future of your plans of, what we're seeing in the home with Google Home or Amazon Alexa? Thinking from a veterinarian or a doctor's perspective, you need your hands to work, and time is critical. Being able to talk and hear back, what is this patient as a dog? How old were they again? Or the questions that maybe you just want to double check. Is that something that you would look at? Is it core to the business, or is that something that you would then say, hey, that's going to come, but we'll get a partner to do that?
Well, we've done voice recognition stuff for many years already, and so particularly in specialty, they often dictate and then import their dictation or have dictation scripts. And our product actually has macro capability, so they can build within their dictation product the ability to create a patient or create a new referral letter or those sorts of actions. And there's a bunch of those providers out there like Dragon Dictate and some of the Google products that are pretty exciting. But actually over the years, what we've learned is that the problem with those products is as a vet, you have to spend a lot of time training them on your voice and stuff, and that investment is something people aren't prepared to make. And we've sort of seen many pivots in our time where we tried to pivot from paper to electronic, and then we tried to pivot to being cage side with tablets, and in the last sort of 2 or 3 years pivot to actually doing stuff on mobile devices. And so we have a lot of work happening on mobile devices now. And the neat thing about that is that on those tablets and mobile devices, both from the Android products and also the iOS products, the voice recognition in them has just become literally incredibly amazing. And so they don't need training. They're able to deal with even lots of medical jargon now, and they can put stuff straight into the record really quickly. And we're going to see that continue to evolve. And the next bit for us is, how do we do something really smart with it? So we've been spending a bit of time with Amazon, who's a really big partner of ours, around their translation products. And there's some real potential with us to kind of change the game around some of that translation stuff. So yeah, I could see a day where you're in surgery cutting a patient, you've got a microphone there, you're able to just talk into it and ask questions and do different things. At the moment, we're not quite there, but we do have people in surgery on tablets, on phones, recording data that's flowing back into the system, checking up things as they go, which is very different to when we started, where there'd be a clipboard with 1 million bits of paper, and really you can't get your fingers on what's really important at the time. So lots to do. I mean, I feel like we're just beginning. Even though we've pivoted so far from where we started to where we are now, it just seems like there's so much more opportunity to connect things and kind of achieve so much more automation.
Which is a good segue. So tell me about your team, the people that have been on this pivot journey with you, and that are the enablers of seeing where you want to take it, seeing where veterinarians want to take it. Who are the people? What are their roles? And where are they based?
Yeah, well, our journey's been very different to a lot of Kiwi companies, and probably to give you some context, we currently have about 140 people spread across Auckland, Dallas, and London, and that said, 80% of our business is in the United States by revenue. So we're a very US-focused company, but we've sort of got there by trying to achieve achieve the outcomes and then fly up there and fly back. And we wanted to be really confident before we kind of built a really big regional headquarters there. And I've sort of sat on the plane next to people that are rushing up to San Francisco to build a big flash office and hire a lot of people. We kind of didn't do that. We went over there and won customer by customer by customer until we had a really big market share. And then we did a lot of research on where are our customers, where can we hire the right people, where can they afford to live, where can they travel to our customers effectively from. So that's how we landed on Dallas, which is not only a fantastic place, but has two really big airports. The wages are reasonable. It's employer friendly. It's also reasonably, employee centric. We can hire the right talent there, and so we've been able to build a really neat hub there, which has been instrumental for our growth. One of the neat things that probably a lot of people wouldn't realise is that a lot of veterinary technicians work in practice but get to a point in their career where they hit a ceiling, and there's just not really an opportunity for them to progress technically or from a people leadership perspective. So we're able to hire a lot of people that want to stay in industry but do something different. And so round about 40% of our current employee base are either vets or vet technicians. And so we've got a huge amount of domain knowledge in the company, about how a vet practice works, not only around the software, which is pretty exciting. In terms of who and where, I mean, we've got a sort of a New Zealand headquarters where we have most of our engineering, and we've obviously got our sales function and support and implementation and finance and people and key accounts and all those good things. We built New Zealand, and then we basically built London next so that we could follow the sun. And so that's probably 5 years ago. And with that, it means that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can ring up and talk to a support person, and it's not like Cranky Craig going to get on the night shift. It's actually someone that's there. And we did support first, and then we figured out very quickly after that we actually needed both the engineering and the data team to be available 24/7 as well. And so we've sort of done that for a long time. And I think in the US, they particularly like it because if they're a 24/7 hospital, they can always phone, they can always get support. And all of our competitors didn't really think like that. They were like, you can ring between 8 and 5, otherwise you can, leave us a message. So, and we've kind of grown it out since there with other departments. So we've sort of got that full service offering in London, and I think that's been really important for our growth. We've had a lot of people on the journey for a long time, so that's really good. And we've had people that have come and worked for us for a couple of years and gone away for a couple of years and then come back. And I think we've sort of focused on trying to build the right culture and the right sort of environment to make those people have the best chance to deliver customer outcomes. And the only thing I would say is that when you're battling away from New Zealand to build something massive, it's really hard. And we've definitely burnt people out along the way. We've definitely had lots of challenges where we haven't got it right, and we've learned from that and tried to adapt. But it's worth it. And in the end, the people that stay, they've got kind of that long-term view, and they understand that it's the hard work we do today that gets you the reward tomorrow, that makes the customer happy, that gets you the next customer. And that's why I'm here. I love that journey and kind of both growing the employees and growing them through doing great things for the customers.
What a journey that you've been on to date. Just as we finish up here, I'd like to ask you a question more broader around New Zealand software, and because you've been in this for some time. 2006 to 2020 in software is like being around in a manufacturing goods organization for 60 years. I remember someone said 3 months is a web year. So in those terms, you've been around for decades. What are we doing well right now that we should be talking more about, and where are the areas for improvement in the New Zealand software scene?
Well, I think we're doing a very good job of growing extremely good engineers in New Zealand. Like, you can hire great software engineers that can be customer facing, which is different from the rest of the world, I think, that can deliver results quickly. And I think that's important. And I think what we need to do is basically get outcomes for customers to grow our software companies and then export them. And it takes a while for overseas buyers to want to try a New Zealand company, but we're starting to get a reputation for actually being able to do really good things in that space. And there's a lot of companies that aren't on the radar that are out there exporting software to the world and doing a really big job of it and doing a really great job of it. And they're doing that because they've got good product people and good engineering guys that are building something that's product centric. We've been probably more of a product company, so we've tried to solve the problems and build great product, and then that's kind of made customers happy, and so they've wanted to buy our product. And there are obviously other approaches where you can be more of a sales and marketing company and have product trail behind. And I think both have their place, but it's about looking at the opportunity and asking what the right choice is. So I mean, we had that build time from 2007 through to 2013, where we really didn't have that many customers, but we were trying to build something incredible so that when we went to market, we would get market share and we would have a credible product that could scale. Whereas we could have gone to market in 2007, got a poor reputation from not doing a good job, and maybe the outcome would have been a little different. And now that where we're at now, it's a really interesting point because we've got this big customer base that we get to do great things with. That's really, really difficult for our competitors to displace. And you see that in our churn rate. I mean, we churn at 1.2% of our customers a year, which is an incredibly low number. And even of that 1.2%, half of that's what we call corporate churn, where a hospital's been bought by a group that uses a different platform. So on average, we probably lose a clinic like every 1 to 2 months, which is, I think, it's incredible given how fast we're growing and you know how much we're doing that we can. And it's a testament that I guess that we're doing good things for our customers. So yeah, I think that's really good. I think we're too humble in New Zealand to get help. And I know that from our journey, we should have probably asked for more help from other people about where they went wrong earlier. I think we shied away a bit from that sometimes because there's some software players and people in the market that are trying to be like the greatest thing and are shaking the tree really hard, and you're sort of like, oh, they're the cool kids and we're not. Let's just focus on our customers and do great things. But actually, a more inclusive industry would be really helpful. Probably really good support from government and innovation would be really helpful. So we found exporting, when we were ready to put our roots down, the operational aspects of that we needed help with. Like, we're gonna put an office into Dallas. Where do we do that? How do we do that? What and not just here's some lawyers and accountants, but here's some people on the ground that can help you. And so I think we can do a lot more to help companies with the operational expansion rather than the sort of pie in the sky thinking stuff that I think we're probably pretty good at anyway, if that makes sense.
So you're thinking there from the government could provide more help into key markets to facilitate almost the administration layer of business, getting set up, providing real estate.
I mean, I just feel like when we talked, there were people there that were there to help us on our journey, and that was really useful. But they were all about how do we help you achieve sales and marketing results into market. And you need that, but you also need a huge amount of operational support, because if you get good sales and marketing support, but you can't deliver your product, it's not very good. Or if you set the office up in a city where people cost 3 times as much to employ as another city, you're probably not going to scale and be able to have enough cash runway to get there. So I just think that's the bit that we sometimes we don't back ourselves enough that we can build great product and actually transact them. We don't need to shake the sales and marketing tree all the time. We can get that bit right if we just steadily do it. But we spend a lot of our time was how do we actually get office space? How do we recruit the right people? How do we navigate the tax? How do we navigate the regulatory environment? They're more challenging in my mind than sales and marketing challenges. And so I just think there's a big opportunity to kind of help with that stuff. And we've seen some of that stuff actually in the last couple of years, like NZT and Callaghan Innovation have been taking people up to the SASTA conference and stuff like that. But maybe some more industry-specific stuff would be more helpful. So like for us on our journey, it's about going to the right veterinary events that's really important. And operationally, how do we do that well and quickly and effectively? So yeah, I think that's important. I also think coaching for people that are going through the journey is really important. I mean, before Ezyvet, I think I'd had a maximum staff indirectly reporting into me of like 18. And so going from 18 to 140 is a massive journey. And at different areas of that scaling, you need people in your ear that can, A, tell you that it's going to be okay and it's okay to cry and you can come back and have another go tomorrow. But B, here's some ideas of what you could try to kind of get there. So that coaching layer could be really important as well. And I think people think first and foremost, the easiest thing to do is just deploy money. But money is actually not as useful as the right advice and the right network of where you need to get to where you need to go. And so I think that's sort of, that's an opportunity that the government could focus on that would be super helpful.
That's really good insight, Hadleigh. And what I'll do is make sure we cut that part and I can then send it to a couple of contacts in government and make sure it gets heard, because there is a real focus post-COVID on the digitization of businesses. And what you're picking up there is that it's not just a sales and marketing effort. There's all these other administrative things. I remember when I moved to London, it probably took me 2 years to realize where I was actually living, and then another 6 years on top of that to start to scrape the surface of the different culture, because it's really not that obvious until you become it yourself. And if there's an organization like yours that's hiring Americans that is in veterinarian services, you are, and for all intents and purposes, in your Dallas office, an American company, right? Like you've set that up. Now, how do you shortcut that for the next software company that wants to move over? It's more than just the insights that Silicon Valley's got expensive and has high churn rate because people want to be on the new thing. It's Dallas has got all of these other infrastructure positives that think about all the negatives that come with it. And so, there's lots of things that you've probably gone through that would have huge value for other New Zealand software companies to consider. But of course, you've got a day job. It's not your job to train the sector. And it's almost luck sometimes who meets who in New Zealand and what you learn. So a more strategic approach from government that provided the things that are outside sales and marketing could be warranted.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've come to almost the end of the interview, and this is where I usually ask a really simple question, Hadleigh, which is there any question I haven't asked you that I should have asked you, or anything else additionally that you'd like to share with the New Zealand Made audience?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've got a pretty standard, standard story. I think we've just worked hard and gone out and grown our business and made it focus on our customers. And we've made so many mistakes and had so many hiccups along the way, but we've been resilient and we've recovered from them and made smarter decisions the next time. And there's a lot of war stories. One day I might write a book about it, but we'll keep that for another day.
Well, I wish you all the best over the next stage of the journey that you're on with Ezyvet. I think what you've achieved is truly astonishing. The early days, you're saying between 2006 and early 2010s, to build something and just focus on build it and not actually get distracted by trying to grow through sales and marketing, which must have been something that you could have easily switched to and built a good enough product. That's a testament to the patience of how you're approaching this problem. And to do it at a global scale across multiple different countries and then run that 24/7 for a problem which is life and death.
as much as human life has a very high value, we all know that our pets are even more valuable to us than sometimes how we feel about our own lives. So, congratulations for the journey so far, both you and your team. And I wish you all the success and keep coding that software in New Zealand.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Enjoyed the chat.
This has been a Kiwi original brought to you by the New Zealand Made team. Thanks for watching. The New Zealand Made trademark is used by over 1,200 businesses in New Zealand. The New Zealand Made team licenses that trademark. Check if you're eligible at bynz.org.nz. If you feel that someone should see this, share it with them now. Otherwise, subscribe to youtube.com/bynzmade, and we'll see you on the next episode.